Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome. I am Elena. I am the content and social media marketer at Start. And tonight or today, I have the pleasure of hosting Stan Silverman. Hi, Stan.
Oh, Elena, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you.
Great. So tonight, we're going to have this webinar about being different. Stan, you were a CEO. You're also a recognized thought leader and influencer. You used to write about leadership. And actually, you're the author of this amazing book that you were so kind to send me, and I really appreciated reading. So welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to appear on your show, on your webinar. Thank you.
Clearly. And so first, before we start, I just wanted to say a couple of things for the audience. It could be interesting for them to know. The structure of the webinar is going to be like this. We're going to have an interview part at the beginning. I'm going to be asking Stan questions, and then there's going to be a Q&A session. So if you have any questions that you want to ask Stan, you can ask them using the question part, the question section in the chat to the right of the screen, and then we're going to read them at the end. Other than that, we're going to be recording this. So at the end, you're going to get an email with the recording of the webinar, and we're also going to post it on our social media and share it with our newsletter. All right. Well, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. And so, as Elena just announced, I'm Stan Silverman. I'm a former CEO of a global chemical and engineered glass materials company. I am in my fourth career as an author of the book that Elena just shared with you. And so I'm very fortunate in that I'm able to move from career to career. So after I left my CEO-ship with my company, I served on a whole bunch of boards, both private, public, private equity, trade association, nonprofit, where I learned a lot about corporate governance. About 6 years ago, I started to write a weekly nationally syndicated article for the Philadelphia Business Journal. So I'm in their newspaper online once a week, nationally syndicated across 43 cities. And about a year ago, my book got published. So my mission in life at this point in my career is to help other people be successful leaders, be successful entrepreneurs, and be successful board members. And I do a webinar like this a couple times a month, and I talk about what I think it takes to be successful.
Very well. So actually, I will start with a question concerning this. All of us could be interested in knowing, how can an individual be different in a sense that can help them win the next promotion or find that job that they want?
Well, all of us have to be different than our peers in a good way, just like every business has to be different than their competitors. And so, for starting with a business, every business needs to really achieve what I call the holy grail, which is to be the preferred provider of product or service in their marketplace, so that the customers and clients in their market buy from them and not someone else. And that's just a huge competitive advantage when you do that. So, for all of us individuals, we want to be different than our peers so that we get the next promotion internally or the next job outside the company. So how do you do that? Well, what you need to do is you need to be an individual that breaks paradigms, that breaks the traditional way of thinking about doing things, and come up with new, more improved ways of doing things internally and new ways of approaching your marketplace. You need to be committed to continuous improvement, which means that everybody within the organization, no matter what level, needs to be committed and have a work within a culture that encourages those folks to constantly improve the areas in which they work. The individual needs to have great communication skills. And so a lot of people think, well, I'm not in sales, I don't have to sell. Well, all of us are selling every day. We're selling our ideas to our bosses, to our peers, to our subordinates. And so we need to be able to convince people that our ideas and our ways of doing things are something that should be considered. All of us need to create a sense of ownership in what we do. And That means that everybody should be able to have the ability to say, this is my job, this is my area of responsibility, I own it, and I'm responsible for improving it and making it perform the very best way possible. And all of us have to be committed to giving our customer or client a great experience, which means that people are happy to deal with us versus someone else in the space, our competitors. That way, we get a huge amount um, uh, of, uh, of business and market share. And so, those are the kind of people that employers want to hire.
Very well. So now we just listed some skills that are necessary for people to be able to differentiate themselves. And as we said, for instance, get the promotion or land that job that they want, especially now. And I wonder if we can get a little more in the details in terms of, for instance, breaking paradigms.
Sure, sure. By the way, the skills I've just listed out are a lot of people call them soft skills. You know, they're not technical skills, but they're soft skills. I like to call them power skills. They are power skills. They're much more important than soft skills. It's what gets you promoted and what gets you to move through the organization. It also helps your company thrive. So let me just focus on one of them, and let me give you an example, if I could. So I talked about breaking paradigms and continuous improvement. When I was president of our Canadian company, we had a chance to build a new plant in Whitecourt, Alberta, to supply the pulp and paper industry. And the market had not yet developed, but it was developing. So the current market was very small. And so our engineers put together the design of the plant. And given the volume that we could project over the next couple of years, the internal rate of return, which is the way we measure the economic viability of a project, was very low. It was like 8%. So I went to our CEO, who I reported directly to at the time, back in the United States, and I said, Paul, I don't think I can take this project to the board. I only have an 8% internal rate of return, IRR. He said, well, tell me about the project. And so I told him about the project, and he's listening intently, and he said, well, how many people do you have running the plant? I said, well, we have the typical 5 people running the plant. You know, we build these type plants all the time. He says, can you run it with 0 people? I said, what? He said, can you run it with 0 people? I said, no, obviously you can't. He says, can you run it with 1 person? I said, no. He says, we'll get to that later. Can you run it with 2 people? So obviously I knew where he was heading with this. I said, well, I guess theoretically we could, I just don't know how to do it. He said, I want you to go back to Toronto, and tomorrow morning I want you to sit down with the engineers and with your plant operations people and design a plant to run with 2 people. I want 1 person on the first shift, 1 person on the second shift. I don't want extra capacity, so take out all the extra capacity that you've built for 5 and 10 years out. Build a plant to handle just the out year type demand, and come back in a couple of weeks and let me know how you made out. So I fly back to Toronto. The next morning, I meet with our engineers and our plant operations people, and I said to them, you know, this is what Paul asked us to do. I think he wants to break every paradigm we ever thought about building this kind of plant. And everybody says, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. So we spent the next couple of days just basically examining every possible task that an individual would have to run the plant. We examined what we needed in terms of infrastructure and capital. We made the plant a lot smaller, took a lot of capital out. And we, in fact, designed the plant to run with 2 folks, 1 person on the first shift, 1 person on the second shift. But we couldn't use chemical operators. We had to go to hire people who worked in the oil industry in the upper reaches of Canada. It's very barren, very desolate. And these people are used to working by themselves all the time, whereas chemical operators are not used to working by themselves. And so we had to pay an extra $10,000 or $20,000 a year to hire these folks. And we designed the plant, and the IRR of the plant went from 8% to 18%.
Wow.
And so I came back to the board and I presented the project, and I got the project approved. There was so much concern about running this plant with 2 people. In the economics, I added a 3rd person, never hired a 3rd person until we started the 3rd shift. So we had 1 person on the first, second, and third shift. And so that broke every paradigm that we ever had about how to build these plants. And getting back to Paul's initial comment about running the plant with one person, we built a duplicate plant 5 years later on Vancouver Island, and we ran it with one person. And when this person got sick or went on vacation, we hired somebody from the pulp and paper industry, a retiree, to come in and run the plant while our operator was gone. This gave us such huge competitive advantage. It actually it persuaded other competitors not to enter the marketplace because they couldn't match our economics. That's what it means by breaking paradigms.
That's very interesting. And what about continuous improvement?
Well, that is so key to the success of every company. And so within my company, and this is after I came back from Canada, when I got promoted to be worldwide business leader, actually worldwide president of our chemicals business, we changed the culture in all of our plants so that instead of having the plant manager and a supervisor basically direct the operators on the first line, people who actually ran the equipment, we changed the culture within the plant so that the plant manager and the supervisors became coach and counselors to the people on the front line. The operators and the mechanics running the plant had the responsibility to come up with improvement ideas for their plant. They knew how to improve the plant. And so we got to the point where we gave $50,000 of capital to every unit within a plant. And so we had 12 plants in the U.S., and we had an average of 3 operating units per plant. So that's 36 plants, 36 units. We gave all 36 $50,000 to spend on their improvement projects. And it was the best money that the company ever invested. These guys knew exactly how to improve the plant and to improve efficiency, but nobody ever asked them to do this. Nobody ever asked them to do this. And I had a really great example of this that occurred back in Canada. And it actually is the thing that kind of got me thinking about this. We had a small production unit in our Toronto plant, which made a product for the high temperature refractory industry. It was very high margin, very profitable. We were sold out on capacity. We hadn't put a dime in terms of expanding the capacity in many, many years. We were running a lot of overtime. It was backbreaking work for the one operator running the plant. And so my plant manager and I decided to call him in, and we asked Luigi Paolini, that was the operator's name. He came to my office and we said, Luigi, we want to ask you how you would increase capacity of your unit. He said, I'm glad you're asking me that because getting called into the president's office, I thought you were going to fire me. I've never been to your office before. I said, no. We want to ask you on how you would improve this plant, your unit, to increase capacity to make more product. We need a 50% increase in capacity. He said, I think I know how to do it, but nobody's ever asked me. But I think I know how to do it. I said, well, would you scope it out and share with us how you would do this, how you would increase capacity? He said, I'll do it, but I need the help of the mechanic in the plant. So very cavalierly, we said, pick your man. So he picked Stan McNeil, who was the best mechanic in the plant, but the worst with respect to labor management relationships, always filing grievances, never wanting to settle on a contract, wanting to go on strike all the time. And I'm thinking this is going to be a huge disaster. But we already gave Luigi the choice of who he could pick. So we stayed with it. And we said, okay, Luigi, you talk to Don tomorrow morning. We'll talk to him in the afternoon, and we'll see if he'll help you. So the next afternoon, we went out to the plant, and we got a hold of Don. And we asked Don if he would help Luigi increase the capacity of the plant by 50%. He said, Luigi already spoke with me this morning. I'm doing it. But I'm going to do it because Luigi's my friend. I'm not doing it for you. I just want you to understand that I'm doing it for my friend Luigi. So we said, okay, as long as you're going to do it. He said, I'll do it. And so 5 weeks later, they present to us the scope of expanding the plant. And it is something so innovative that I would have never thought about it, but it made sense. And so Don McNeil did one other thing that we didn't ask him to do. He cost estimated the project out at $260,000. This is back in like 1986 dollars. I'm thinking it's $500,000. But he says he can do it for 260, so we let him do it. Well, 2 months later, the plant's up and running. Within a week, they're at 50% increase in capacity. Within 14 days, they're at 62% increase in capacity. Everything's running just fine. And Don brings the project in at $250,000, 10,000 less than what he told us he would do it for. And so all four of us, the plant manager and I, Don and Luigi, fundamentally changed. Don McNeil is now walking through the plant telling his fellow union brother, and these guys in management aren't so bad. They trusted me for what I could do with my mind in addition to what I could do with my hands. Kind of powerful statement that is for an hourly person who was against management to say that. That's like golden, right? And so Luigi changed in this way. I'm taking a visitor through the entire plant. We stop at his unit. And he says, I'll take the visitor through my unit. I said, okay. So he does so. And then after he's done, we walk through the rest of the plant with the visitor. The next day I see Luigi. He says, do you know why I did that? I said, no. Why did you do it? He said, I did it because this is my production unit, not yours. This is mine. And immediately I'm thinking, we created a sense of ownership in Luigi because we trusted him for what he could do with his unit, for his area. And that's what kicked off this worldwide program and philosophy across all of our operating units around the world to really push down responsibility to the lowest level, give them the resources they need, trust them that they're going to do a great job. And they do. They did a great job. And so that fundamentally changed the plant manager and I. So from that point on, for the rest of my career, my number one objective was to empower the people below me, give them a sense of ownership, give them the resources, and cut them loose to do their thing. And they'll achieve great results.
Very interesting. And also, I think this is in line with what we've experienced, like what we've heard in the past. We've interviewed other specialists, and we had Professor Francis Fry, for instance, talk about how leadership is all about empowering people. And also, the candidate experience expert, Jerry Crispin, talk about the fact that it's more and more relevant now for candidates and employees, clearly, to have a path in front of them of constant improvement. With leaders that actually, help them develop themselves and grow. Very well. Actually, we're going to touch now upon what is possibly my favorite skill, which is communication skills. So, what could you share about that with us?
Well, as I mentioned before, our selling skills are very important because we're selling all the time, and our communication skills are very important in a more general sense. And we have to have great listening skills. We have to be able to listen to people, hear them out, don't make judgments. We can ask questions for understanding, but we need to make sure that we fully understand where they're coming from. And we need to give them a chance to feel that they have skin in the game, that we're going to listen to them. And so when I became CEO of the company, we had a paradigm in place with our previous CEO where I was chief operating officer at the time, and I would go to our CEO and I would say, Dick, I think we should do this on this project or approach this problem this way. He would immediately shut me down and say, well, it won't work. I couldn't get two sentences out. So I said, Dick, I'll tell you what, I'm going to write you a note on this. So he said, okay. So I wrote him a page or page and a half letter where he couldn't turn it off because and I'm not in front of him. He comes in and says, boy, this is a great idea. Let's get it done. So I said to myself when I became CEO, we're going to change that paradigm within the company. And what we're going to do is I'm going to listen to people and we're going to debate issues. So I might say on any one issue, I think we should go direction A on an issue and expect some feedback. More often than not, though, I would ask my subordinate to give me his opinion before I would share mine. But sometimes I would share mine because it's kind of human nature to do that. And so my CFO or the president of our chemical group might come and say, I don't think you should go direction A on this issue. I think we should go direction B. Well, how I respond to that comment will forevermore set the exchange between that individual and myself. If I basically say to the individual, well, I don't care what you think, this is how we're going to do it, future conversation is completely dead forever. But I would say, well, Bill, why do you think we should go direction B on this issue? And he would come back and say, well, I think for this reason and that reason. And we would debate the issue. We would debate it for an hour, for a day, for a week. We would bring in experts. We would debate as equals, not as boss and subordinate. Sometimes we would yell and scream, but we would debate the issue. One of three things would happen. after that discussion. Number one, I would sustain direction A and thank and say to Bill, thank you very much for telling me about B, because we've now beat B up against A and A up against B, and I think A is the right way to go, but thank you. Or I would say, Bill, I really think you're right. I think B is better than A because we beat each other. We beat one alternative up against the other. So we're going to go direction B. And then he would feel really great that the CFO in this case changed the CEO's mind. But more than often than not, more than 50% of the time, actually, we would find direction C better than A and B because we debated it and we would go direction C. We hardly ever made a mistake when that occurred. We hardly ever made a mistake. It's one of the reasons why we drove earnings from $14 million in the year before I took office as CEO to $43 million in 5 years. We debated the issue. We debated it. And we debated it as equals. And, my personality is such that I can be told that I'm wrong. And I'll admit that I'm wrong. Because the only purpose really is to do the right thing and to drive shareholder value and treat the customer right and satisfy their needs, take care of our employees. Well, the way you do that is you go the route that's the best route and you make the right decision. So communication skills are really important. The other skill, and I always bring this up, it's kind of my pet peeve. How many of us sit in a room when an expert on an area is presenting a PowerPoint slide, you're in the first or second row and you can't read the slides because they're packed with information or the graphics aren't right? Well, I mean, these guys, this is an expert in the area. He should know how to present. It basically kind of kills his presentation. So I always add this comment when I talk about it. If you're doing PowerPoint slides, view yourself as a member of the audience in the last row. If you can't read your slides as being a member of the audience in the last row, change the slide. Put the slide on 2 or 3 different slides. But don't copy something out of a book and show it and think that people are going to be able to read it. They're not going to be able to read it. So it's very important that you communicate and put yourself in the position of the receiver of the information, not the giver of the information, because you don't count. Only the people that listen to you and you want to hear what you have to say count. You don't count. So that's what I have to say about communication.
Okay. And you just mentioned like giving a great experience to your customers or clients. Do you have an anecdote for that?
I have a great anecdote. And so there's an Apple store where everybody buys their iPhones on Walnut Street in Philadelphia, down in Center City, Philadelphia. So I go into the Apple store, and I had just purchased for my wife a new iPhone, and I needed a case. She wanted a very specific case. And so I go up to one of the sales representatives, one of the people there, and I tell her what I want. And she says, okay, let me show you what we have. And she just has really a nice way about her. She sees I'm carrying an iPhone myself. She asked me about my iPhone and do I have any problems with it? I had 1 or 2 problems with it, using it. She says, well, let me take a look at it. And she fixed it as we're talking about cases for my wife, right? And she fixed it for me. And so I picked out the case and she says, do you want to pay by Apple Pay? I said, yeah, I've never used it before. I don't know how to set it up. We'll set you up. So within a minute or two, she sets me up and I pay for it. And I buy a couple of other things while I'm there because I needed it. And I'm walking out of the store thinking, oh my God, this has to be the gold standard of customer service, because she just gave me a great customer experience, a great customer experience. And so I wrote an article about that, which was nationally syndicated. And the vice president of Apple Retail, Jim Bean, happens to sit on the Drexel University board. And so all the stores around the world reported to Jim Bean. So I told Jim Bean about my experience. I sent him a copy of the article. Well, this young lady at this Apple store on 17th and Walnut in Philadelphia is now a rock star across the world because I wrote an article about her, about the great customer experience that she gave me. And it just feels good to go in and just deal with these folks. They're going to be very helpful, very helpful. And I have a lot more stories, but that's my favorite story because it's so simple and clean.
Indeed, and I think that a lot of us can share good experiences with Apple for that as well. They're renowned for it.
They were the gold standard. So everybody should benchmark what they do and try to reach their level.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that part of our audience is actually composed by recruiters and hiring managers, potentially, and HR specialists. So then for them, I have this question for you. When you're interviewing a candidate for a role, if you're a recruiter, for instance, um, what traits should you be looking for in this candidate always?
Well, some of the traits I just mentioned earlier, but let me add one that I think is really important. I want this person, especially if they're customer facing, but I want that person, even if they're not customer facing, to have common sense and good critical judgment. I'm sure all of you are aware of the Starbucks incident that occurred in Philadelphia about 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe it was 3 years ago, where this black gentleman, African American gentleman, came into the store on Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia, was waiting for a friend, was working on his computer, and the barista said, "Do you want to buy anything?" He says, "I'll buy something when my friend arrives." And she ordered him out of the store because he didn't buy anything. And he said, I'm not going to leave. I always come here and I do work. People are working here without buying anything." And so it's not part of your business. It's not part of your business model. Well, she calls the police. The police arrest this guy and escort him out. Well, it was the worst public relations disaster for Apple anywhere around the world. And I'm sure you've read about it in Europe, where this individual, this barista, did not use common sense and good critical judgment. First of all, she didn't follow the business model of the store of Starbucks, which is to, hey, invite people in, let them do work on the Wi-Fi. They'll eventually order coffee and maybe something to eat, you know. And it was absolutely horrible. And so the police commissioner had to apologize publicly to this gentleman who got arrested. And the CEO of Starbucks flew into Philadelphia to apologize to this individual. There was a call to boycott Starbucks across the world, all because this individual didn't use common sense and good critical judgment. And so obviously she's working somewhere else. Um, I have an example that I'll share with you. And I'm not going to mention the chain, but it's a big box store chain around the world. And they have greeters at the front door to greet people coming in, and also to basically look at, I guess, receipts on the way out if they think somebody is suspicious looking. So the greeter sees this elderly individual pushing a cart full of goods out to their car. They're having trouble. And so he or she leaves the post at the front door and helps this individual load their car. And they go back to their post. Well, the store manager finds out she's only gone for a minute or two. The store manager finds out about it and fires this individual because they left their post. Well, if I was the area manager of this company, I would fire the store manager because the store manager did not let this greeter use their common sense and good critical judgment to help a customer load their car. And so I like to break the rules when it's in the best interest of the company to do so. So you want to hire people that I think will do that. And how do you test for that? I'm not sure. I guess you have to talk to them about their previous experiences or give them examples and have them respond to an arbitrary example, hypothetical example. But I think that's really important. They also have to have a proactive can-do attitude. You don't want people that only do what's required of them, or if you ask them to do something else, they say, "Well, it's not in my job description." Well, you don't want that person. Go on. The interview's over. You want people that are going to help you be successful, which means that they're going to have to perhaps sometimes do something out of the ordinary. It helps them grow. It helps you be successful. So I don't want to hire any of those people. You want people that have a great attitude about helping the company and helping the customer be successful.
Yeah, agreed. And I think these are important things when hiring a candidate for your average job, but also when you're hiring an executive. But in that case, what traits should you be looking for specifically, and what kind of questions would you ask, having been an executive yourself?
Well, when you hire a high level person, executive person, so and I've hired a lot of them and I've interviewed a lot of them. Um, and right now I sit on, well, I'm down to 6 boards. So when a candidate gets to me to kind of do a final check, they've already been through the process. So I, it's already been demonstrated they have the technical skills or the ability, experience to do the job. I ask them a couple questions. I want to know, especially if it's the CEO or the division head of a large division. I want to know what kind of tone at the top do they want to bring to their organization? What kind of culture do they want to bring to the organization? And I think tone at the top and culture are huge determinants of success of any organization. I want to know how they're going to hire great people reporting to them so that they in turn hire great people reporting to that level. I want to know about what they look for in hiring people and how they go about doing it. I also want to know a little bit about their management leadership style. I want them to describe it. And I also want to know how they're going to inspire everybody within their organization below them to achieve great things. And I've talked with people for an hour to an hour and a half on just those handful of topics. And if I feel that the answers aren't right, I don't recommend that the person be hired, because my experience now, spanning 40 plus years, is that if the answers to those questions aren't right, they're probably not going to work out.
Yeah. All right. Now, we talked about soft skills or power skills, actually. And I think we can definitely agree that emotional intelligence is very important for success. And so, then what could we tell our audience to help them identify people as emotionally intelligent?
Um, Emotional intelligence is really important to be successful. So I think the technical skills for a job are really threshold skills. It what gets you through the door, but it doesn't necessarily get you promoted because you need other skills. So what are the other skills? There's self-awareness. You have to know how you come off with people and how you come off to people. And so, if you're coming off like a jerk, you have to be able to ascertain that and change your style. And a lot of people don't have that ability. They don't know how they come off to people. They don't know they come off gruff. They don't know they come off toxic. They don't know they come off as a tyrant. And so they need to be able to understand how they come off by how other people react to them. And it's really important for emotional intelligence. Um, and it gets to how other people perceive you. Do they perceive you in a good way or in a way that's not so good? You don't want to communicate with people that put them on a defensive. I've worked for bosses where uh, the very questions they ask you in private or in even public, which is even worse, put you on a defensive. There's no reason to put anybody on a defensive. You should ask questions for understanding, but not to put people down, because people don't want to work for people that put people down. It's just, and you wouldn't want to do it either. And so people who put people on the defensive are really not great people to work for. You want to work for somebody, you want to hire people where they're going to give credit to other people's achievements and not take them for themselves. I've seen this, and I've worked with people that basically take credit for the work below them, for the people the work below them. They take credit for themselves. I never do that. Whenever the people reporting to me do a great analysis, do a great job, I'll take them to the meeting where I present to the president and have them present. I want to have them present. I don't want to present it. I didn't do the work. Let them do the work. Let them do the presentation. Let them get credit for it. Also, it gives the CEO a chance to see who works for me and how great a job I've done picking great people below me. When I go into a board meeting, I don't make the presentation if I can get one of the business managers to make the presentation. It's their business. Let them make the presentation. And I'll be there for support. I'll ask questions, maybe leading questions to kind of draw something out so that the board can hear it. But all this gets to what I would call emotional intelligence. And of course, the last thing is you don't want to bully people. You don't want to bully. You don't want to hire somebody that's going to bully people. People like that, leaders like that, always crash and burn. They always crash and burn. I've seen it over my 40 years experience. They always crash and burn. And so, you want somebody, I guess everybody's read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. If you haven't, you should read it. He talks about a type of leadership which he calls level 5 leadership, which is somebody who is not all full of themselves, is reserved, has a way about himself that is not self-promoting. I used to work for a company. I used to work for. I was on. I'm sorry. I was on a board of an organization where the CEO would say, "Boy, aren't we great? Aren't we great?" Well, they may be great in some areas, but they're not great in other areas. If you tell your employees that you're great, they stop working and you slip by. You slip down because your competition's trying to be great. And so, if anybody thinks they're great, like a great organization or a great company, it spells the disaster over the next year. So in my company, when I became CEO, I would tell people, and we were doing well. Remember, I said we drove earnings from 14 to 43 million in 5 years. People would say, "Boy, aren't we great? Aren't we great?" I said, "No, we're not great. We're okay here. We're pretty good here. We've got a long way to go here." And it's up to a third party, an outsider, to say, "Boy, your company is great." And our response will always be, "Well, we're good in some areas, not in others. We're always on a journey to be great. You're always on a journey to be great." Those are the kind of people you want to hire because they'll inspire their people to be on the journey to be great. And when you do that, the competition will not catch up. They'll only catch up when people sit on their laurels and say, "Well, we're just great." So this is all part of emotional intelligence.
So actually tying it onto that, the emotional intelligence and its importance on the job, I a few weeks ago did a little poll on LinkedIn, and I remember that a lot of people answered. It was about toxicity in the workplace. I wanted to know how many of the people in my network actually faced it, and how many of them had it with a coworker instead of, for instance, their boss. And the toxic boss was so common. It was actually scary. I think a lot of us had to deal with that in our past or in our present. And in your book, you actually do mention working with toxic individuals. So then I wanted to ask you if you care to share how you handled it for those of us who are, going through it or will have to in the future.
Well, let me tell you that every article, and I have over 320 articles published each week for the last 6 years. I haven't missed a week. And so, and I put all my articles up on LinkedIn. The two subjects that get the highest hits, and I have 27,000 LinkedIn followers or connections, whatever they call it, 27,000. So whenever I write about a toxic boss or lack of trust within your organization, I'll get 4 to 5,000 hits, like within days, really quick, really quick. Much more so than my other subjects. So I know there are hot button subjects for people. And so I used to work for a boss that was toxic. And I actually called him a tyrant. Um, and at one point, I called him a terrorist, but my editor wouldn't let me write my first article for the Business Journal and call him a terrorist because of the connotation. So I had to call him a tyrant. He would undermine all of us. He would second guess us. He would make decisions that we should be making. He would do our job for us. He would chew us out in public. And he was just absolutely so bad. And of course, he managed up very well. We didn't have a hotline at the time. And we were all afraid to go to the CEO and report this guy because he would know who it is. The boss would know who it is and fire us. And so there's not much we can do. And so I get promoted to be president of our Canadian company. And I go up and I'm now his peer. He runs a division in the US and I'm running Canada. 3 years later, I get promoted to be his boss when I become worldwide general manager, actually worldwide president of our industrial chemicals group. And I fire him. And there was so much relief that I got rid of this guy from the division. They actually partied for days. I brought in the very best manager I could, very best leader I could within the company to turn this thing around. And it took 6 months before these people who worked in this division to start making decisions for themselves, and the division started to grow. The division started to grow, and so I learned a lot from working with a toxic tyrant. I learned what not to do. I learned what to do. I learned how to survive. A lot of people quit and got fired and didn't survive. I remember one day he and I were talking about some arcane issue in his office. He was yelling and screaming at me. For some, I can't remember what it was about. I said, Dick, I'm leaving your office now. When you've calmed down, you can call me back up and I'll come back up, or you can visit me on the second floor and we'll solve the problem. He says, you can't leave. I said, I'm leaving the office right now. So I get up and I walk out. Well, exactly 8 minutes later, he's in my office, calm as a cucumber, and within 5 minutes, we resolved the problem. So then I knew how to handle him, never take any crap from him, and I never did. And so um, it was a great learning experience. Kelly Clarkson has a famous song, "If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger." Too bad that song wasn't out back in the mid '80s, because that described completely the situation I was going through. And so I fired him. And the boards that I sit on now, I make sure that I'm on the audit committee of the board, because that's where the hotlines now go. So any hotline report that comes in about a tyrant or a boss that's terrorizing their people, I want to know what the CEO is going to do about it, and I'll hold them accountable for it, because I think I paid the price working for this person, and so my way of paying back society is to make sure other people don't continue to work for tyrants and for people like this.
I think it's commendable, and everyone would appreciate that. Um, and when it comes to leadership, what would you say were the characteristics or the skills that helped you, succeed?
Well, first of all, credibility and trust with your coworkers. I mean, that is absolutely paramount. You have to have that. You have to have the credibility and with your people that work for you, and with the other people within your organization, actually. And they need to trust what you're doing. If they don't trust you and you don't have credibility, you might as well leave. The organization will go anywhere, and your boss needs to fire you. And I always look at people that had bosses that have these type of people reporting to them where they have no trust or credibility. I wonder, why haven't you fired this guy? So it's a reflection on the boss as much as it is on the person who doesn't have credibility. So credibility and trust is extremely important. We talked about listening skills. Very, very important to listen and to let your people feel they have a voice and have a piece of the action and have ownership in what they do. It's very important to build an informal network within the company, especially when you're coming up through the organization. Because first of all, the company really runs on the informal network just as much as it does on the formal network. I mean, you can pick up the phone and get something done because John Jones or Sally Smith is down the hall and they're your friends and they're going to get the thing done for you. It's extremely important, and you just want to be transparent. You want to be transparent. And so when I was CEO, every quarter I would call a meeting of all management and at our corporate headquarters, and I review the P&L statements and the state of the business for our 17 businesses around the world. And for the Europeans, this is usually at 10 o'clock in the morning. So the Europeans would dial in at like 4 people in Europe. The people in Asia Pacific we would tape it and they would see it the next day because obviously it's during their sleep time. So as I'm talking about a business and the business is in trouble, it's not doing well. If I try to blow it past the audience, I lose their eye contact. They start looking at their phones. They start talking to their neighbor. They start sending emails. And they're not paying attention because you're trying to blow something past them. And if you try to blow something past them, they think, boy, that he doesn't know that it's so bad, which is bad that he doesn't know, or it's so bad he's afraid to tell us, which is even worse. So you just tell them like it is. Tell them like it is. And more than likely, there's the manager of that unit is sitting in the room, and you say, Bill, would you get up and talk about what you're doing over the next 3 months to turn this around? And so all of a sudden, people start nodding their heads and say, oh, yeah, hey, he told it it's bad. Let's see what happens over the next 3 months and 6 months and see if we can't turn it around. So you need to be transparent and never, never try to blow something past Never try to blow something past. The other thing that's important is, and I learned this as a as a CEO reporting to a board, if I had a problem and I would report it to the board, never report it without telling them what your solution is. And this is good for every level. If you have a problem and you tell your boss you have a problem, what's the boss supposed to do? Solve your problem? No, you solve the problem. You tell them, you tell the boss what you think the solution is, and then you'll dialogue with it. And maybe the boss has some really great input, but unless you give the boss a solution, there's no place to start. It's not the boss's job to fix your problem, it's your job. The boss's job is to help you. But to help you, you need to first tell them what you think you should do, and then you'll talk about it. And you want to hire people that will do that. You want to hire people to take responsibility to fix their problem, but will also listen and get input from people.
Yeah. And now that we talked about the human side of work so much, in your book, you mention how networking is fundamental. And so I would ask you why it is that you think that, although we agree. And also, if you can share some advice in these times, because clearly COVID is changing things, and now a lot of these situations happen remotely. But also, maybe the new generation could have some sort of feeling that they can network over social media better than they would in person, even outside of a pandemic situation. So, how would you address those things?
Well, let's first talk about the importance of networking. And so, after your first job out of school, all subsequent jobs, or you're going to get through your network. You're going to get through your network. You're not going to sit there and send 1,000 resumes out to 1,000 companies and expect to get a call back. That's just not going to happen. And so all of us should be networking all the time. We should build our network, get to know people. We should go to meetings, professional meetings. We should know when to, as we walk into a room, recognize when a conversation is occurring that's very intense between two people or three people, and you don't want to break into that. You want to recognize conversations which are more informal and less intense, where you can break in and say, "Hi, my name is Stan Silverman. I'm from PQ Corporation. This is what I do." And introduce yourself. Listen to what they do. Ask the other people in the room, in that little group, what they do. Talk a little bit about, see if there's anything in common. If there is, you want to pursue that with the individual, perhaps one-on-one. And also know that within the program at a time, you know how to gracefully exit that group and join another group. You can't be taught this. It's only through practice that you do this. It's through self-confidence and practice. But it's extremely important to build a network of people that will help you when you need it to get a job. And also you're going to help them. And so when your network contacts call you and say, and it happens all the time to me, I will put people together. But I've been doing this for a while. And a lot of them have gotten their positions because I've introduced them to what I think would be a good possibility for them. Or I introduce them to somebody who may introduce somebody else, one of their friends. Um, it's absolutely critical to be successful professionally, to build networks and to maintain your network. Today, when we're not going out every night having dinners and cocktail parties, it's really hard to do. And so you need to find a way to do that through social media. You should, and also through telephone and Zoom calls. Every once in a while, you should pick up the phone and call somebody that you know that you haven't talked with in the last month or two, just to maintain contact so you remain on their radar. See how they're doing. Send them a note. Send them a note on your iPhone, or send them an email. How are you doing? How are you managing? When do you think this is going to be over? So that you're not out of mind, that that you're in their minds. And it's easy to, when we all go back to work and we start networking again, you don't have to reestablish your network from scratch. It's extremely important to network. That's the one thing I don't think our universities really stress enough. And I go crazy talking with the professors at Drexel University, where I'm vice chairman of the board, about the importance of this. And they kind of look at me, well, yeah, but I'm not sure it really penetrates. So I tell the kids, I coach and counsel a lot of students, and I tell them about it, and I hope it sinks in. I hope it sinks in because it's really important.
Very well. So I actually took a look and I see that we have a lot of questions from the audience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly ask you two last ones from my side, and then we're going to switch to theirs because I don't want to take up all their time either.
Okay, great.
So one thing that I wanted to ask you is for the people out there who are currently looking for a job, how can they best differentiate themselves to stand up from the crowd? And what are the key indicators for this? Hello? Um, Stan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Did you hear my question, or should I ask?
No, no, I did not. So could you repeat it?
Right. Yes, absolutely. So this question was for the people out there who are currently looking for a job. So then, how can they best differentiate themselves and stand out from the crowd?
Um, well, let me back up a little bit. So when you're in a current position and you leave that position, whether or not you leave voluntarily or because you're downsized, a couple of rules. You should always be preparing for the next job when you're in your current job. All of us are going to be moving around every couple of years. That's just the way it is. You never ever want to burn your bridges. You always want to guard your reputation. You want to get out of your comfort zone and learn new skills. You want to network and you want to manage your personal brand. So, but now that you're out in the marketplace and you're looking for a job, what should you do? Well, you should whenever you go to an interview, whenever you apply for a job through your network or through other means, you always want to ask yourself this question: like, what does this hiring manager want? Well, they want to know what I can do for them. What can I do for them? And so you have to be prepared to answer the question, what you can offer them. So to do that, you need to know the company you're interviewing at. You need to do a lot of research on them, do due diligence on them so you can find out about the culture and about what it's like to work there. And you can do this through friends. It's not really hard to do. And so when you present yourself, you need to present to them how you can help them advance the mission of their company, how you can help them be successful, um, why you would be a good employee, what skills do you bring, and a lot of the skills we've already talked about and touched on, um, and you need to show that you are the best person for that job versus anybody else that's going to apply. That's how you differentiate yourself. And the way you do it is by talking about some of the things that I've talked about today. You can put it in your resume. So they say, oh my God, this resume is so much different. Look what they're talking about, continuous improvement. This person is talking about how we need to achieve the position of preferred provider in the marketplace and how they can help us do that. Nobody else has written that. Let's call this person in for an interview and see what they have to say. And so your first gateway, of course, is your resume, which has to be different than everybody else's. So if you talk about some of the things, if you write about and talk about at the interview, some of the things I've talked about today, I guarantee you're going to be different. Nobody will talk about the stuff I've talked about. They just won't. And that will give you a leg up.
Yep, yep, yep. And okay, so if we had to briefly share three main takeaways with the audience, what would they be?
Well, I think obviously you want to look for people that differentiate themselves vis-a-vis their peers. And so when you're interviewing somebody, you want to look for that skill and trait. If you're the one looking for a job, you definitely want to do it so you stand out from the crowd. You want to help their company be the preferred supplier or provider to the marketplace, um, because no other candidate's going to do that. And there's really two types of people in this world. I've come to kind of realize there are those who see the world full of possibilities and abundance, and those who only see scarcity and limitations. Bosses only want to hire the first type of person. So don't be the second type. Um, I know a lot of people where you walk up to them and say, well, how are you doing today? Well, okay. And then they start telling you about the list of problems they have. It's like toxic. You don't want to listen to that. Hey, everybody has problems. You want to be a person that's very positive, that can get things done. And so that's how you want to come off to future employers. And that's how you want people that you're hiring and interviewing to come off to you. You want them to be positive, but genuinely positive. They have to be genuine. Obviously, you can't, you don't want to come off false, or you don't want people to come off false to you, but you can tell that difference. You can tell the difference. And again, and you want to be the kind of person that gets out of their comfort zone. We have time for a 2-minute example, or are we out of time?
I think
Like, we okay. So this is my best out of comfort zone experience, and I have a lot of them. So I am business manager for hydrosodium metasilicate, which is a chemical used in cleaning, and we call it ASM. That's all you have to know. Well, for today. And so Remplank, which used to be a large French chemical company, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, they've since merged themselves into other things. They also make this product, and they start dumping their product into the United States at below their home market price. And they're taking our customers away from us. And I know that they're probably dumping product, and there's a law against dumping. And so you can take the company to the International Trade Commission in the United States and sue them for dumping and get them to apply dumping duties. So I go to my CEO at the time, and I go to our in-house attorney, and I say, I think we ought to sue these guys for dumping. And we talk about it, and they say, okay, let's do it. I'm a 32-year-old business guy, manager. I've never done anything like this before. Like, this is, I could be walking on Mars for all I care, for all I know, right? And so our internal counsel gets us an outside expert on dumping, and it's not one of these high-priced guys, Wall Street guys, who charge a huge amount of money. It's a gentleman in Philadelphia who has a huge amount of experience, but he's kind of a rough and tumble guy. I mean, he's not really the kind of person you would picture who would go up in front of the International Trade Commission. But he says to us, he's very good. He says to us, to my product manager and myself, you guys are going to run the case. We said, what? He says, you're going to run the case. He said, I'll help you. I'm going to guide you, but you're going to run the case. And the reason is that when you go in front of the International Trade Commission, it's in a room just like the Supreme Court of the United States. That's the kind of chamber it's in. Instead of 9 justices, there's 5, but they're sitting on high. It's very impressive, and you could kind of say, "Oh my God, why am I doing this?" But if you do it right, they will give you a lot more leeway in terms of court procedure than they will give an attorney, because you're just two guys defending your business guys defending your marketplace. You're not attorneys, so they're going to cut you a lot of slack. And so we're going to do this thing. So after months and months and months and months, we prepare. We go to Washington, D.C. We're sitting in this huge chamber of the International Trade Commission, and the 5 commissioners are up on high, and we present our case, and we do a great job. I mean, we blow it out. And 2 weeks later, they announced the decision, 5-0 in favor of my company. They assigned the highest dumping duty of any chemical in the history of the United States. It felt like we won the gold medal.
wow.
And so here I am, a 32-year-old guy, and my product manager is like a 30-year-old. He's never done this before either. And we have just done something which is out of this world, completely out of this world. We had no business doing it, but I'm thinking, hey, if we can do this, we can do anything. That's why you need to get out of your comfort zone and encourage your people to get out of their comfort zone.
Very well put. I think that's a really interesting anecdote. All right, so I'm gonna excuse myself with the audience for taking so much of their time asking my own questions, and now I'm gonna move on to theirs, so we can start the Q&A. Let's see. I see that a couple of these have been voted, so I would start with this one. What is, in your opinion, the perfect mix between technical skills and what you call power skills? Is it 50-50 or more like 20-70?
Well, it's really a hard question to answer. I've hired people from the Ivy League, Harvard, Yale, business guys who decide not to go to Wall Street and become investment bankers to work for our company. and they never make it. After a year, they have huge technical skills, but they lack emotional intelligence and the power skills, and they don't make it. So I'm not sure what the right balance should be. So maybe it's 50-50. I'm not sure what that is. All I know is that people who do make it and are very, very successful and build great businesses within our company and great organizations and help develop great people are probably not the folks that have gotten straight A's in their technical subjects, but they just know how to get the right things out of the right people. They know how to do that and develop the people below them. And so I've just talked myself into it. I guess I would favor the power skills a little bit more than technical skills because I've seen that as a success.
Yeah. And then I see in the modern workplace, we have more tools to make ourselves noticed within the organization, but also the competition is more fierce. Do you think it has gotten easier or harder to stand out at work? That's a really good one.
Oh, that is a great question. Um, I don't think it's changed. I think if you're a great performer and you have great skills in both the power skill area, and technical area, and you help your company advance, I think that's probably not changed much, even though the environment has changed a whole bunch. I mean, this is not. I mean, today, even versus last year, versus 10 years ago, even last year, it's completely different. But I think people with great skills and great talent will always stand out because they'll find a way to do it. They'll find a way to do it.
Yeah. Another question that I think is interesting is what are the biggest changes that you've seen comparing today's workplace with your experience when you were starting out?
Oh my God, the biggest change was technology. It's technology. So I'm going to date myself and say that I went through engineering school with a slide rule, not a calculator. We had computers, but they were huge as rooms, and they weren't very powerful. And I got my engineering degree using a slide rule. Today, we are all empowered. I have two laptops that I work on every day. Fortunately, I'm on my second one because the first one, 15 minutes before the session started, didn't work very well on the sound, so I subbed it out. We all carry iPhones. We all can track via GPS. We can go for jogs and runs, and we can track that on our phones. Today, it's just so completely different. I could not write an article a week and have 320 over 6 years if I didn't have the internet to do my research. I can't imagine going to the library and researching this. I mean, I would just die. I couldn't do that. So we are empowered with historical tools to do our jobs. We just have to know how to use the tools. And I can't even imagine what it's going to look like 10 and 20 years from now.
Yeah,
I just can't even imagine what that's going to be.
I think
But
it's
we
going
do have to keep up. I have friends that really, really have trouble sending an email, who have trouble surfing the web. Can you imagine? Who have trouble using a spreadsheet. Can you imagine? Can't do a simple Excel spreadsheet on a business model. And the world's going to pass them by.
everything is changing very fast indeed.
You
And
have to keep up. You have to keep up.
yeah, new platforms like social media platforms being born all the time. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay, I think we can squeeze in maybe a couple more. So I'm going
Great.
to ask you, how would you recommend dealing with colleague jealousy when trying to stand out as an employee?
Wow, that's a really great question too. Um, well, you have to be aware of the environment that you're in, and if you give credit, if you work collaboratively with people and make sure they get credit, joint credit for what you do, the jealousy goes way down. If you work in a non-collaborative way, and if you try to take credit for everything, it doesn't work. So bring them into what you're doing. Ask them for their opinions. Ask them to partner with you on a project. Have them do some work on it. And don't be afraid to share the wealth in terms of praise with them. First of all, you'll get them to be your allies. They'll become part of your informal network in a positive way. You need a lot of that to survive today. You need a very good informal network with allies within the company. I was almost fired a couple of times by the tyrant I talked about. Why couldn't he fire me? Because I had a lot of political capital. You couldn't get away with it. I had a lot of political capital, a lot of friends up top, up high, that would have never tolerated it. And so you have to build an infrastructure around yourself that will help protect you, and also help protect them. And so you just have to have the emotional intelligence to know when and how to do that.
Yeah. Okay, a final question that I'm going to ask. Looking back, can you pinpoint a certain moment in your career that was a breakthrough for you? And what was it?
Well, that's really a great question. So I only had two goals in life, and they were sequential. The first goal I had getting out of school was I wanted to run a P&L statement. I wanted to be the business manager of a business where I had P&L responsibility. And I eventually achieved that when I went to Canada and I was president of our Canadian company. And so my second goal after that was to become CEO of a company. So P&L responsibility, then CEO responsibility. And I didn't have any sub goals. I didn't worry that, well, if I didn't achieve this goal by year 3, I was really in trouble. I just let the I kind of let the timeline just kind of go. Got promoted. I've been through 11 jobs in my company, by the way. I was promoted 11 times. 11 times. Only one of them was to be president of our Canadian company, where I got P&L responsibility. The other one was to become CEO some 8 years later. And so, hey, don't worry about too much about goals. Just go directionally in the right direction, and you'll get there. You'll eventually get there. You'll eventually get there.
Very well. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to be here with us and answering all of these questions. I think it was a very interesting conversation. I hope that the audience didn't mind that I went on a little longer than an hour because it was really insightful, I believe.
Let me thank you, Elena, for being such a great host in terms of getting the questions to me and kind of managing everything behind the scenes. And let me thank the audience for your participation, for your attention, and for your questions today. I greatly appreciate it. If you're interested in reading more about what I have to say, you can buy my book, Be Different, The Key to Business and Career Success. You can get it on a number of platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever. And I think you'll enjoy reading it. I think you'll enjoy reading it.
Yep, I testify. It's a really good book. All right. Thanks again, everyone. And you're going to get your recording in your inbox.
Thank you very much.
Have a
Bye,
nice
everybody. Have a
day.
great evening. Have a great evening.
Safe.